Hey guys, Star here. I wanted to use this opportunity to talk a little bit about our timelines, so pre-alpha, alpha, beta, and I'd also like to talk a little bit about some of the things that I believe that we are doing differently from past games and other studios that make this a much more possible experience than I feel some suggest. Some of our largest points of contention are like, you won't be able to make this game, it's going to cost $50 million, and either that or it's a Kickstarter scam, and you're going to do the same things that Zenith did. And first, before anything else, I would like to say that that is a valid opinion. We have been burned. I was burned by Zenith, and then I was pretty upset that Township Tale stopped being developed. Granted, they had their own reasons for that. But the point is, this industry and this community is very burned. And so I don't think that I am surprised at all that people think that this game is not going to succeed, that it's going to be a complete failure, or that it's just a scam outright. I hope that I can change your mind, but if I can't, then all I can do is continue to post updates and be transparent with the community, and hopefully that will change your mind. If it doesn't, no hard feelings. I wouldn't blame you. So, yeah. For those of you that are interested and looking at what it is we're doing, I would like to share those things with you, but first let's talk timelines. So, pre-alpha, alpha, beta. Pre-alpha is going to start as soon after the Kickstarter as we can reasonably manage. There are a few reasons for this, and as a developer, I understand that it is difficult for other developers to pour their heart and soul into something and then to put it out even in an unfinished or broken or janky state, because it is painful seeing your work viewed as that way. But from a player perspective, I also don't want to have to wait 5 years to play a game. I'm not saying it's going to take 5 years. I'm just saying, as an example, waiting for a game can kill its interest. There have been many a times where people have waited for a game for 5 or 6 years, and then all of a sudden they don't care about it anymore. As a player, I don't want to have to wait that long because the developer has a perfect vision for what their game should be. Because the gameplay loop is what brings people back, not the perfect vision, right? The perfect vision comes over time. So we're going to start with a pre-alpha as soon as we can after the Kickstarter is done, and then once we get to an alpha point, using our Notion and our roadmap for development as a reference point, then we can move into alpha and then into beta and then into release. I can't give times or dates on alpha and beta just yet because I don't know. It's going to depend on the success of the Kickstarter. It's going to depend on the speed of development. There are a bunch of factors that I wish I could kind of like predict right now, but I cannot, and it would be foolish of me to do so, so I'm not going to. Secondarily, with the phases, they are not going to be limited time phases. The only time we'll shut servers down is for development updates, but whenever we open the pre-alpha, it's going to stay open until the alpha. And whenever we launch alpha, it's going to stay open until the beta. When we launch beta, it's going to stay open until release. I think there's a lot of value in having a lot of community input, and having them in the game, despite whatever preconceived design philosophies I have, is going to be much more helpful to me than any controlled test. So that's kind of the mentality. We want those kept open for the duration of development, because it's going to make the game better for it. Now let's talk about scope. So one of the things that I know a lot of people look at is like this, MMOs take 50 billion to develop, and they have to be these huge giant games, and small teams can't do it. That is a correct statement. However, we are not making a traditional MMORPG. I am not making a game that has 10,000 hours of quests or a million pieces of gear. You know what I mean? We understand that VR as a medium is different than desktop. I couldn't imagine the agony that would be playing through the entirety of A Realm Reborn in a VR headset standing in the middle of my room. Because VR games are not made for standing around and reading text. They are for doing. And so with Asteria, what we want to do is, instead of creating these giant pieces of narrative and these giant pieces of linear content, you create a core that has a lot of depth, and it opens up the door for emergent gameplay, right? So instead of having a combat system where you do a million combat quests, you have a combat system that has depth, and then you allow different opportunities to rise to the surface because of it, right? And then we can expand on that a lot easier and a lot more depthfully than more linear content, right? I'm not expecting on Asteria's release for it to be the greatest, biggest game of all time. That's a silly expectation to have, and it will kill this game. Instead, I want to have a very strong foundation that is fun, that keeps people coming back, that we can expand upon. That is the goal. And because of that goal, we can focus on having our code and our architecture be very lean. That way we don't have to worry as much. There's always going to be tech debt whenever it comes to complex projects, but we don't have to worry as much about putting a piece of code to the side to go work on something else. Instead, we can focus on polishing the architecture that we already have so we can prevent some of the larger tech debt problems down the line. All right, let's talk finances. So finances are a pretty big section. I want to talk about two different parts. The first one is going to be the actual finances itself, and the second one is going to be survivability of the game, what this game needs to survive as a project. So starting with finances, we're not doing any venture capital, we're not taking any investors, we're not giving any share in the company. That is an incredibly silly thing for a game, because the second that your game starts not making enough money, it is going to be steered towards something that will make money. You know, all of a sudden you're adding a battle pass and a battle royale mode to your VRMMORPG, which is an insane decision, but it's one that's controlled by investors. And so we are going to just cut that problem outright by not dealing with investors. The only thing that we will ever pursue is grants, and that's its own thing, because it doesn't dilute control of what you were doing and doesn't involve returns on investment. So there is complete creative and decisional freedom by us to continue making what we were making without outside input. Now, in terms of actual costs itself, you guys have already seen the space-time pitches. They are incredibly cheap to run. Yes, they are going to scale, right? There's no way that it's going to just stay $1 per weekend every weekend. If we end up having, 4,000 players or whatever, obviously it's going to have to scale. But I would argue that with 4,000 players, we have bigger problems. I digress. Whenever it comes to the actual price itself, it is still incredibly cheap, and that is with Spacetime's main cloud service. Once we move to our own hardware, we're just paying for electricity for the servers and network connection. That's it. So the game itself, keeping the servers running, incredibly sustainable, can be done for a very long time with little financial input, even at scale. Also, whenever the Kickstarter is over, we're not going to add 20 people to our team. That's also very silly. If you develop the scope first, your first, scope lines, you fill those lines, and then you can expand from there. That is the, dare I say, correct way to make a game as a small team. You want to make that core experience and then move further. So putting 20 people on payroll to make a bunch of stuff that isn't planned yet is silly. We will contract out where we need be, and then we will continue to develop features over time, and then we will continue to contract if need be whenever those expansions happen. But we're not going to have a large team of like 30 people or whatever to make this game. Because we don't have to, right? We've talked about it before, but Spacetime allows really quick development. I'll have a video that I post probably somewhere in the Discord showing myself adding a feature to the game in a couple of minutes, just using the software. But they've already done that on their own YouTube channel too, so I recommend you checking it out. It's a really cool piece of tech. Now, that being said, Spacetime is not a miracle. It's an incredible piece of tech, but we as developers still have to do the right things, and we have to make the right decisions. So let's talk about survivability, right? We already talked about scope. We don't need this giant, flashy, groundbreaking release. We need a moderate success with at least a couple of hundred people that want to support this game for the game to be sustained. That's it. And that way it allows us to focus on operating and building more content for the game instead of focusing on these large financial models that companies push to try to speed the wagon up, right? So with that, let's talk about the pricing model. So for pricing, this is probably the largest talked about point of contention. And the reason that I want to give it a little bit more attention here is because not only is it going to be a good definitive piece of information for anybody that has questions or wants to talk about it, because I feel like I have failed to do that in the past, and so I want that to be it for us. But also, just in general, there are a lot of reasons why we're doing what we're doing, and I wanted to talk about them. And I also wanted to add some clarifications onto how the system will work, because there are also some confusions there, and I don't want anyone to feel like they're getting ripped off. So the way that we have it set right now is that the majority of the game's progress and content will be free. So if we have, 20 levels in each skill on launch, you'll be able to get up to like 12 or 15 levels for free without any input. And then the rest of that, whatever that difference is, will be behind a subscription model, kind of like Final Fantasy XIV. kind of like VR chat. I know it's kind of a that's a wide comparison, but that will allow you to access that later content and some social features that are otherwise behind that paywall. And then we want it to be cheap. I want it to be 5 to 10 a month at most. I really don't want to go higher than 10 because there's a sustainability problem if you have a bunch of people who, I mean, I don't want to pay a $15 sub for a game that doesn't have 10,000 hours of content like Final Fantasy. So that's a big consideration. We want it to be very sustainable, not just for us, but for the individual, right? Now, as the paid content expands, so let's say that we come up with an update that adds 10 more levels, the free content will also expand. So if we get up to level 25, then instead of playing till level 12, you'll be able to play to 18 or 20 for free. So even if you never pay a cent, you will continue to get more content as time goes on, because the paid members will also get more content as time goes on. We're doing this for a few reasons. I'll kind of blow through them. First and foremost, sustainability is going to have to be very big if we want this to exceed as a VR game, right? There are a lot of reasons that people wouldn't want to pay for VR games. VR already has, a pretty bad piracy problem, particularly on standalone devices. So our mentality is to, if you can't afford to buy this game, or even if you just don't want to, you can still play the game. You know what I mean? And then for those that can support or do want that extra stuff, they can do so, and they can enjoy those benefits. And then even if you never pay a cent, you can continue to get more content over time. I am of the mentality that I don't want to call Asteria art. I don't think it's earned that title yet. But I think that people should not be restrained from enjoying what is essentially art because they can't afford it. I think that's silly. And so we're kind of making a decision to have a model that is very beneficial for people who can comfortably support us, and still very palatable for those who can't. So that's the mentality there. And I know that a lot of people have pitched the idea, some jokingly, some seriously, that we should make the game free or have it be like $20 and then just add a bunch of like cosmetics, like paid cosmetics and microtransactions. And I am going to give those people the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and say that this is what you are used to in the market, and that is okay, and it is not your fault. But microtransactions, battle passes, the paid cosmetics things, they are all very predatory practices, and they aren't what make games good, in our opinion, so we won't be doing them. I don't want a battle pass. I don't want microtransactions. You should be able to earn everything in the game. If we ever do any sort of microtransaction event, we've already talked about this in the Discord, they will be for charity only, and they will be very clearly marked, because again, I don't like the microtransaction system. I don't like that companies have gotten away with these freemium games where they have these predatory cosmetic practices. It's silly. It's silly, and it's a really poor direction that the game industry has gone in. I don't want to make VR the same way. I like VR too much. Alright, let's talk about the players problem. So PC VR is already a pretty niche thing. It is a pretty small circle. So how are we going to sustain a player base with such a niche player base, right? The first one is that we're going to be releasing on standalone after PC launch. It just means that standalone players won't be able to be a part of the pre-alpha, alpha, beta, as we described in both the Discord and the Kickstarter. I'm sorry, the priority is a PC first game so we can get everything right, and then we can downgrade instead of upgrading a Quest game to PC. Secondarily, a lot of the design decisions that we're making actually surrounds the player problem. So in most MMOs, you have a bunch of different cities, like Final Fantasy, for example, you have your 3 major starter cities, and you have this like incredibly giant world that you can get lost in. That is bad for VR, because you don't have that many players in VR to populate these cities, and so they end up feeling empty, and people are either so dispersed that the world feels empty, or they're all sitting in one place, rendering those other places not relevant. So the main player city, Solara, which we've talked about a lot, is going to be the only main player city. And every gameplay loop, whether it's combat, crafting, smithing, whatever, is going to have Solara be a large part of it. And that way, there is an incentive for this gathering hub to be populated at all times. Instead of dispersing, you have to give meaning to the locations. And so we hope to do that with Solara being a prime point of gameplay, as opposed to just a secondary thought, or something that you spawn in just to leave and never come back to. We're also doing media creator tools, so cameras, props, setups for all those things. Very important for having and allowing media creators to create content and post it, and then also create their characters. And one of the other things that we want to focus on is a very large breadth of customization, because people don't want to go play a game and they want to make their character that they always use, or whatever their depiction of their self always is, and not be able to because there aren't customization items. There's also a focus on like the anime style graphics. I know that's very popular in the VR scene. I find it good myself. It's very popular. There's a reason that VR chat is popular in the hardcore VR chat spaces for that style, right? And then also the PC spectator mode we've talked about. So first, let's talk about players. You have your free players, which are, and this is going to sound, it's going to sound very cynical and pessimistic. Trust me, this is important. Free players are content for paid players. Paid players are incentive for free players, right? So free players will see paid players having like fancy stuff and all this other content and go, man, I kind of want to be a part of that. And then paid players won't feel like the world is empty because there's only 300 of them, right? So that's the mentality for the player dispersion. And then the spectator mode that we talked about, some of you might have seen the proofs, but the desktop mode for this game will be a mode where you can play as a wisp and follow your friends around. There is a lot of reasons that we're doing this. We didn't want to make an actual PC mode because that's a silly amount of development for not great output. But this way you can follow your friends and you can talk to them. Your wisp lights up brighter whenever you talk louder. So I think it'll open up a lot of opportunities, not just for content moments, because that sounds incredibly funny, but also in the vein of like just sharing content with people that you know. How many times have I been in VR and I've had friends that don't want to get into VR or don't actually play VR, but they want to watch me or my friends play or whatever. That's very often. It's a very often and common thing. So to create a system where people on the outside of the VR scope can look in and see what all the hubbub is about, so to speak, that is a good thing. And more games need to start doing it. And we're doing it with this system, without compromising the integrity of like the gameplay systems by adding a desktop mode where they can do everything. All right, last thing I want to talk about is the PR of the team. Two things. First, originally you guys might have seen that our names, or the company name, quote unquote, was Damage Point Digital. I changed it because it's stupid. I don't care about running a company. I don't care about being a CEO. The only reason we're doing those things is because I need to have the facilities to pay contractors properly, and to keep payroll and to have an EIN and all that. But I don't care about running a company. I don't care about having these like maximizing profits and having these big corporate meetings. It's stupid. It's dumb. We're making a game with a small team, and none of that is necessary. Secondarily, for those of you that are new to the community, that lack of corporatism or like anti-corporatism, whatever, extends to the Discord. And so sometimes you will see our supporters bullying the hell out of us, and sometimes it's vice versa. Sometimes it's a little strong languaged. That is normal. That's very normal for us, because I do not want to go into this having a bunch of clients that I create a fulfilling product for. This is supposed to be a good time, because it's going to keep our team from getting burnt out trying to present to this cold, lifeless audience in our eyes, and it's going to keep the people in our community from seeing us as cold and lifeless and unapproachable, right? People should be able to come to us and talk about all these systems. We have discourse about the state of VR MMOs, about the pricing models, all the time in there. So if you see any of that, I hope to continue that notion, because it is very good for the life cycle of a game. It's very good for sustainability. So yeah, that's it. As of right this instant, the Kickstarter is at $107,000. I mean, thank you. What do you even say to such an outpour of support in such a terribly burned community? So to the over 500 people who have supported this project, I can't thank you enough, but I will try my best. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, and I hope you all have a great day.